It's WG, bring you SNB, and let's talk about Night of the Hunt event 2, the Crimson Corridor, in which your mission is to kill as many blood servants as possible. So once off, you only need to defeat 120 servants so you can get your max rewards, which is definitely more attainable than placing high on these rankings. Once again, the reward for the ranking is only a relatively minor amount of gems as well as a frame, while you also do get gems based on your total percentage, and that all gets calculated and sent out at the end of the event. Before we get into the event itself, we once more have to check out the buffs real quick. By far the strongest buff is Scarlet Thirst, where you have a 20% chance to get a Blood Soul, which you use to cast ultimates on killing a monster, as well as also Thunderstorm. When performing a basic attack, inflicts induction on the nearest target, which is incredibly powerful on units like Van Helsing, Lamia, and even Cecia. Outside of that, I've seen a couple variations of Forbidden Ride and such, but for the most part it stays true to the physical tier or tier. You won't find many variations of it. I did play around with most of them. Like a decent, you could say a decent one is this one right here, where when the battle begins you get 5% crit rate, so it ramps up to quite a big amount of crit rate. And yeah, that is pretty much about it. So let's get into the tier list. So this is pretty much all the primarily useful units in this fight. Obviously others can be used, but they won't play a major role. Let's talk about specifics. Let's start with the top row. You're most likely always going to see Van Helsing. That is because he can infinitely ult in this fight. You're going to see a cappella for obvious reasons. The rage region, the damage increases, physical and magical, and the crit rate. Agaris, because he auto targets during his ultimate, which will get relevant. At the end of the day, most of the time, you're better off having characters that you don't have to aim with, because units spawn faster that you can reasonably aim at anyway. Cecia and Bella have to be treated in a pack. If you don't have a Bella, Cecia doesn't work as well, and if you don't have a Cecia, Bella doesn't work as well. So you do have to treat them in a pack, and then Transcendent Noah is there just for his incredible AoE damage. Then other, like, closing in on the top tier units would definitely be Lamia and Thibault. Lamia, for her AoE, a bit of a drawback is how slow to a degree it is. Same is kind of true with a Thibault. And I guess we can also add in a Lamine right here. But you will have to make sure that you do the proper predictions of where the enemies spawn. I'll obviously show you the spawn rotation and such, just so you know what you're getting yourself into. Then we have other useful units like Agaris, just AoE damage you can target, and Pusa, AoE damage you can target, Dacias, AoE damage with her ultimate. Geraint does also have AoE damage to a degree. Iona and Friedrich are just there for being low cost Crescent Moon, which allows you to go into the Blood Moon, which you want to do quite a lot here. And Kayn, so you really only use Iona and Friedrich if you don't use Bella. And then Kayn, yeah, he's there. He does AoE damage, alright? And most of the other characters aren't necessarily that good for the fight. And the reason why Iona also isn't here is because displacing your Van Helsing actually leads to Van Helsing losing damage by him stopping to attack. So that's pretty much a breakdown. Now let's get into the fight. So this is the team we'll be using, which includes Bella, Cecia, Lamia, Acapella, and Van Helsing. The best swap here would be taking out Lamia for an Incendiary Agaris or Transcendent Noah. We don't own those. Gearing priority in order is going to go Van Helsing, gets your best gear. Then it would be Cecia, and then it would be Lamia. So you can pretty much just follow the tier list when it comes to who to gear. And yeah, starting hand priorities. You actually want Van Helsing's ultimate in the starting hand because it's the first one you're going to trigger during this whole fight. And yeah, this fight is to a degree pretty simple, to a degree somewhat complex. Yeah, let me actually show it to you on 1x speed, then we'll swap on to 2x speed, and I pretty much just, yeah, I'll tell you about it at the end of the day. So it really becomes kind of a spam fest towards the end. And for the first one, you're just going to take care of the enemies, and then you see already we got like a huge amount of blood because of the talent, the chances triggered, and we then used our Van Helsing's ultimate. After that, what you really want to make sure is that you get your Cisia ult out, because Cisia also starts channeling. Cisia basically turns into like a mobile turret, so you want Cisia to start channeling, and then you get the ability to also use, for example, the ultimate of Acapella. And you don't want to use Van Helsing's ultimate multiple times, because it actually stops his rotation and he'll get his attack speed stacks back just by killing targets. Now let's quickly talk about the spawn where we have it right here. So if you have someone like a Lemine, someone like a Lamia in here, and you want to get more kills, the enemies spawn always bottom right, then up here. So bottom right, bottom left, top left, bottom right, bottom left, top right. So it always goes in this pattern, in kind of like this zigzag. So yeah, so it always starts here, goes over there, moves down here, moves up there, and then starts here again if you want to predict enemy spawn locations, which for this team specifically isn't actually the case, because this team is to a degree quite automatic, and that is because, for example, we did say we don't want to trigger Van Helsing's ultimate, and Cisia and Acapella are channeling. While they are channeling their ultimates, we cannot trigger their ultimates, which leads to this scenario where Van Helsing's ultimate is here, and then there's Acapella and Cisia, but we cannot actually do anything. And most of the time you're pretty much just here waiting to use more ultimates. And if you're not using the Cisia Bella combo for the multiple hits, what you really want to do is just pretty much spam your ultimates, but make sure you don't touch Van Helsing's so that he doesn't get any extra downtime. It is not a specifically complex fight. You can also run this fight on auto and it can work very well, but it probably won't be crazy high score worthy. Let's actually get our rotations out, make sure that we have our skills in use. Come on, there we go. Yeah, so as you see, like most of the time you even be stuck in a scenario where your auto ultimates are going to be on cast. And if you're wondering where I'm looking, I'm just looking at the character modules, making sure that I use the ultimates when I can. If you play this whole thing on 1x speed, you'll have slightly better timings, you'll lose slightly less time, and that's, for example, the difference it made for us between 336 and 356 runs. If you're if you're interested in the damage, you'll see most of the damage comes from Van Helsing, then followed by Cisia and Lamia as like the third option. And one of the issues with Lamia is that she has a bit of trouble hitting enemies, and that's also why for example, for the other teams above us, you see we're currently in 5th. You have a Incendiary Agaris in still pretty much the same team formation, but here an Incendiary Agaris and a Noah. Here it's going to be the same team formation we are running, just with an Incendiary Agaris. The same thing is true here with once more an Incendiary, and also for the top team there's an Incendiary Agaris, because Incendiary Agaris just chooses laser beam, bing, bang, bang, boom, bam, bing, and then everything is dead. So, yeah, this is Night of the Hunt event number 2. Let's stay tuned for event number 3, and I hope you were able to get yourself the Hunt reward or higher in the rankings. Peace!